And that was an Irish answer, Frank. You asked me to give you,
got it.
but I gave you the host rather than giving you permission. So
Okay, so
Here we go.
we are recording.
Okay, so just some background. What kind of prompted this? A couple of things was that, well, for about the last 5 years, since I turned 70, I've become very aware of my age, not because of the way I'm feeling or not because of what I can do or what I can't do, but because everyone else seemed to be talking about it. Everyone else seemed to be reminding me, oh, okay, you know, you're great for your age. That you know, look, you know, just constant propaganda telling me what age I was, and then bits and pieces telling me what I should be doing and shouldn't be doing, and so on. And I was thinking about that and all that messaging. And a couple of weeks ago, we started recording a program on CBS television, CBS Sunday Morning. And it's very enjoyable, actually. So we tape it, don't get up early to watch it, but tape it and watch it later. And it's kind of what do you call a magazine program. It's got lots of little interesting bits and pieces. And 2 weeks ago, they did one on ageism. And they started talking about exactly what I was experiencing. With various people who've done research about it and so on. And so that's what prompted this. So I decided, you know, we have talked about how to optimize old age and so on, and the digital divide, and you know, Jim and Eamon in particular did presentations, but so this is just what I said. So I thought it would be interesting just to talk about what is the messaging, what impact is it having, and just to get your impressions. I'd be very interested in your feedback as to whether any of you have experienced this. So there is a tremendous amount of research I've discovered about this. There's a WHO paper on it. There's a report there, which is referred to on that slide at the bottom, done March of last year. And all sorts of think tanks, universities have been doing research on it. So it's pretty widespread, obviously. And this is how WHO describes it. Pertaining to stereotypes, that's, they say, how people think, prejudice, how people feel, and discrimination, how people act, directed towards others or oneself based on age. Age being the number, not your state of being and your state of health or state of anything, but just that number that you have. Interestingly, the term ageism has been known for quite a while, coined in 1969 by this American gerontologist and psychiatrist. He was the first director of the National Institute of Aging, but it's interesting how he got involved and interested in it, because when he was at medical school, he found he was disturbed by what he describes as a dismissive and contemptuous attitude towards the elderly and their diseases. A lot of the researchers describe three types of ageism: interpersonal, institutional, and self-directed. Interpersonal is pretty obvious what it means. Institutional, you know, that might encompass a wide range of things, be it hiring policies in companies, be it you know, any rules that are considered unfair. For example, airlines only being able to, only allowing not booking online or checking in online when there is a significant segment of the population who can't do that. And self-directed is when you yourself start to internalize the messaging and develop a negative attitude I think the first two can tend to lead to the third, can tend to. And as I'll get into later, I feel that, you know, I'm advocating resisting the propaganda, but I have to say that it has kind of, to some extent, got inside my own head. You know, and I start unconsciously or semi-consciously, even in groups, to think, oh, I'm the oldest person in this group, and you know, am I relevant? How do they view me? So it's sort of a self-confidence erosion. And I think we can all see from COVID and the effect that COVID had on people of all ages, and especially the elderly, that this undermining of self-confidence is really very detrimental. This thing from University of St. Louis, ageism is everywhere, in the workplace, in the media, in Hollywood, in schools, and in healthcare, and is something that almost everyone will experience at some point in their lives. So here are some personal examples. My sister-in-law operates e-bike tours around Holt. And when I fell off my bike last October, 12 months, she said, oh, you know, I'm not going to rent a bike to you. Now, she herself has fallen off her own bike numerous times, but because she's 15 years younger than me, that's not a problem. Hertz Ireland, as we talked about this before, won't rent to me because I'm over 75 and I had an insurance claim that I shouldn't even submit it. It was so small. A friend of mine, Stephen, has stopped driving even though I think he has no limitations, just because he's 76. When I was on my cruise on the Erne Estuary and the Erne Lakes in October, I stumbled at one point, and like, you'd think that, you know, I'd fallen off a cliff or something. I mean, people are being kindly, you could say, but there was also a perception, oh, this ancient person here is very delicate. And then I've had numerous examples of people assuming I'm unable to do something, and all kind of random comments, you know, maybe you shouldn't be doing that, maybe that's a bit risky, you know, maybe it's not age appropriate, so on. More generally, this comes from an ageism survey that was published in the UK, I think, in 2001. But some interesting things that they reported. Told a joke that pokes fun at old people. Now, mind you, I've many such jokes, which I find. So I'm not disparaging humor, but the birthday card, that's a common thing. People feeling ignored, have an insulting name, patronized, treated with less dignity and respect. Doctor or nurse assuming that a person's ailments were caused by their age, being told you're too old for that. Somebody assuming you couldn't hear well because of your age, something assuming you can't understand because of your age. So these are all the kind of things that are very, very commonplace in everyday life. And I'd say generally, I and most people probably ignore them, but it's like a dripping tap. It has an effect, I believe. Then there are generalized messages in society, advertising. Just look critically at ads you see on television. You see a lot of stereotypes there, ageist stereotypes. Movies, sitcoms showing older people as incompetent, incapable, maybe in a light-hearted way or in a humorous way, but still it's there, and so on and so on. And there's a study here supporting this statement, that 2009 study, exposure over time can result in the internalization of ageist attitudes and stereotypes. So this is where it starts to get inside one's head to a degree. So afterwards, I would like any of you to say whether you're aware of this or whether you think it has affected you in any way or whatever. This is another survey, quite a large one, recent, on the prevalence. So you can see that it's people have picked up on these messages very frequently. Now, the same survey did point out that most of the people interviewed had positive attitudes to aging. So they either have resisted or feel they have resisted the messaging and are living their lives based on their own capacity rather than the number that their birthday says. This other study looked at some of the effects of internalized or self-directed ageism. These would be, to me, very typical of what I've seen with older people affected by the isolation of COVID. That's a kind of a loss of confidence, confining oneself to age-related stereotypes, becoming weak, unhealthy, even less able to accept new learning opportunities. Low levels of esteem and self-confidence. Adults can affect adults' health negatively, especially mental health and well-being. Those believing they're too old are more susceptible to increased self-efficacy and increased negative emotions. And it's increasingly recognized as a risk factor linked to stress, anxiety, depression, and lowered life satisfaction. Conversely, positive perceptions and attitudes to aging are linked to beneficial effects on psychological well-being. So it's a two-edged sword. And I then, thinking about this, I look at, the stereotype versus the reality. A stereotype is this one definition I found, described as a generalized belief about a particular category of people. Pointed out that stereotypes can be useful when you're making generalized decisions, but obviously often or mainly, probably mainly erroneous when applied to particular individuals, and are often a basis then for prejudicial attitudes. The reality is that chronological age is merely a generalized indicator. It's not a predictor. So yes, when you're 80, you're less likely to be able to run a marathon than when you were 30, obviously. But it's not a predictor of when you will or will not be able to perform a particular task or engage in a particular activity. At any person's age, at any age, a person's capability across a range of activities will vary widely. And every person can and should self-assess these capabilities. And I think that numerical age is a distraction from these realities. I, for example, my sense of balance isn't great. So I avoid things that involve a keen sense of balance, or I'm careful. Because of my hip surgery, I'm not supposed to jog before I could jog. So it varies so much from individual to individual, and that's how it should be treated, I think. I'm coming up to my last slide, I think. And this is just how I respond to what I've read and researched and what I've seen in that program. The first thing is to have an awareness. So when I hear or see one of these messages, just that I'm aware of it and say, oh yeah, there it is. It just makes it easier to not let it get into my head, which is the second thing, to resist the message and try not to get it into my head, even though, as I said earlier, I think in my case it has somewhat. And focus on the positive, the things that I want to do and that I'm capable of doing, things I enjoy and the people I like to be with. And then to remember to be proactive. And we talked before about Sanjay Gupta's 5 steps: move your body, stretch your mind, rest your body and brain, fuel your brain, and connect with others. That's me done in at 4:20. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, I must say it was that's very thoughtful indeed, Peter, and obviously you did a lot of work to pull all that together. And it's kind of hard to say anything. You know, I think you've hit the nail on the head with regard to the stereotyping of older people and the fact that it's up to each one of us to be positive and to see the positives and just keep doing what we have been doing. But there is always that inherent thing that you know, I'm not able to walk as fast as I did 10 years ago or 20 or 30 years ago. I'm not able to run whereas I might have done before, and it doesn't make sense to do kind of handstands and things that maybe I could have done as a younger person. But that doesn't mean that you can't do an awful lot of things and keep doing them. And the funny thing, I suppose, about any one of us, I'm sure everybody has the same feeling, that you look out and you don't see yourself looking out from yourself. You don't see yourself as old. You're the same person as you were 10 years or 20 or 30 years ago. It's very hard to actually think of being 76. At least that's the way I feel. But there are certain things happening to one's body and one's ability that you have to recognize are part of that aging process.
I was interested when you were saying about the numerical age, because we obviously always focus on the numerical age. But I mean, somebody of 76 could be the same as somebody who's 66 or 86. It'd be interesting to find out what our real age is rather than our age on our birth cert.
Exactly.
And some doctors will, or people who would examine you would say, okay, you're 76, but actually you are as fit as a regular average 66-year-old, or maybe the other extreme. So the numerical age isn't necessarily, as you say, Peter, a predictor of who you are and how you feel.
When I was doing this, actually, Paddy, I'm 3/4 through Paddy, the recording of Paddy Lord's trip. And Paddy Lord, you are a model of what we need to be. Just do what you do what you're able to do, you do what you're capable of doing, and you don't let people tell you, oh, you're too old to be going. That's very dangerous territory. You shouldn't do that. You know, you could trip and fall, you could get sick, blah, 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 blah. Well done.
Peter, there's another component that was in my head earlier, and I didn't see it fitting into your categories, and that is the generational attitude to aging and respect. Like, let's pick a stereotype Asian family where the grandparents are treated with respect, and in modern America, when I got here, and as I got older, the younger generation didn't have that generational respect attitude to me, and I saw it as being quite different to what I'd been accustomed to back in Ireland, where the grandparents and older people had, hey, they're the people with the wisdom, but that wasn't in the States. Did
That's
you?
true. You know, Peter, you took the words right out of my mouth. I live in Southern California, and believe you me, the emphasis on youth here in Goodlucks is just amazing. It's almost like it's worth money. But if you look at different segments of the population here, in particular, Japanese people generally, young people, middle-aged, before they get older, they show a very heightened respect to older people. And if you compare Europe with the United States, my opinion is that European countries generally have more respect for older people than people here in the United States. And it's, a lot of it's got to do with utility and efficiency and all the rest of it. And we're going to get a job done and we want a younger person, stuff like that. And to me, age is just a number, but they look at you differently if you're over, 40. And so it's something you have to handle and have to deal with. But certainly I agree, there are certain nationalities that treat older people much better than others.
Yeah, no question. And I thought about that, and there were some very brief references to it as well. One, but you know, we know that the Asian cultures tend to revere older people. And in Africa, in my experience as well, there's somewhat of that. But at the same time, there's actually some legislation going through the Nigerian Parliament related to ageism, race discrimination. And I found that kind of odd, and maybe it's because they treat older people with a lot of deference and respect, but still regard them to be outside the mainstream of society. So we're putting you up on a pedestal and admiring you, but you're not part of us. So there's kind of an exclusion factor, I think. The TV program, and it's also referred to in a lot of the literature, referred to the cosmetics sector, we call that, both cosmetic surgery and cosmetic products. And all of that, I mean, I don't, there's no stopping that torrent. But I mean, the way they put it is that it's saying you're old, you need to look younger, and you need to get, your eyelids raised or your whatever, to continue to be relevant is the implication, or to be attractive or wanted, or so there's all of that. I haven't done any of that yet myself.
I had an interesting experience over Thanksgiving. We always go to Jennifer's brother and his wife. And you all know, I mean, I'm considerably older than Jennifer. So all of these people are not a generation younger than me, but they're quite, the oldest other person is Jennifer's sister at 62. And she's sort of the elderly in the group. So we're dealing with people who are mostly in their 50s and their children who are in their 20s, in their 20s. So we were watching something on TV, and one of the young women made a comment about females in movies along the lines that you described, Peter, that it's very difficult for older women to get roles in Hollywood. Well, that segued into a exactly almost opposite conversation. And the next thing you know, the young people were complaining. These are all the 20-year-old were complaining about the way middle-aged and older people in America treat them. It's reverse aging. And their main complaint was, we think of them as intellectual and social lightweights. They're dingbats. And a lot of it, they claim, is because of the TV programming, which in large measure shows younger people as completely as morons. If you watch, I don't watch too much of it, but a lot of the characters you see, they are absolute intellectual lightweights. And so these young people, all of whom are not intellectual lightweights. I mean, one of them is doing his PhD in physics at Stanford. They all have advanced degrees of one kind or another. And they hate this shit because they feel that their age group is actually being discriminated against on ageism as well. I had never thought about it like that. And it was I didn't tell them we were going to be talking about this, issue, but it was interesting to me to have them feel that ageism was being applied to their group.
Barry, I think that's a wonderful example. And I remember way, way, way back when I was a kid, there was a phrase out there, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Or it's something like that. And words will never hurt you. And I think that's completely erroneous. I think the reverse is that words can be more lethal than a physical injury.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're a good communicator and you know how to use the language, you can really have an effect on people's mentality. Now, the other week, or whatever, a couple of weeks ago, when I was doing that thing on the encountering the digital divide, I mentioned that it can be a it can be a two-edged sword. You can have the people who are young looking at the older people with an impression, and the older people looking at the younger people with the entirely opposite impression. And that's inevitable, I guess.
Yeah, there was an English sociologist on Bill Maher a couple of weeks ago talking about the problem that young men in America are having. And, you know, he painted a very dystopian view of the future for a lot of American males. They're no longer competing with the women in college. They're not competing in the job market. You know, he made the comment that on these social media sites, the dating sites, 8% of the men get all the swipes.
8% of men get what?
Get all the
All of the
swipes.
attention.
You know, where you swipe, in other words, to choose or
Yeah.
date the man, 8% of the men get 95+% of the attention. The other 92% of the men get nothing and become very, very, very turned off, isolated. And a lot of these men are the men that are showing up in these extremist groups.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
I spoke with my
former
kids.
My
Sorry, go
former
on.
wife has a good turn of phrase. Some of you know her from college. And, you know, we were talking about this, Alan and she and I were talking about this in a different context. And she said, the problem these people have, and this is her Dublin tongue coming out, they're not getting laid.
Well,
And
that
this
may be
man-
part of it.
This man
but-
on the show was saying the same thing. The biggest problem these young men have is they do not have an active sexual life. And so they're turning to porn and they're turning to anger.
Barry, an aspect of what you just mentioned is that everything has become so very visual because of the pandemic, and now we've got Zoom all over. So you just go by the appearance of the person in front of you. So a lot of these women will selectively go for the more pleasant looking people versus the ones that aren't so pleasant. And that's why this 5 or 8 or 10% or whatever it is, that's why you're getting that number. And you know, all those guys who are looking to get laid should be going back to bars and trying to find some women there instead of sitting at home looking at all of these images on their laptops and whatever.
There's another dimension to what you're talking about, Barry and Eamon, and that is, I was having a discussion with my kids, and they went to one of the upper high schools here in Austin, and we were talking about this and the male-female dynamic. And my daughter gave me a good observation, and that is the teacher asked a question, and before she's finished asking the question, a category of males will have their hands up to answer the question before it has actually been asked. And they have created dominance in the room because the teacher will respond to them first because they had their hands up first.
Yeah, on a more positive note, I acquired a new friend in the last few years, Jim Calley. Jim is a retired, semi-retired cardiologist who came to be a friend through woodworking. Jim and I talk a lot about these things. He's the same age as I am. And he made a comment the other day that I found very, very interesting. In his field, they talk about this a lot, and his comment was, we need to start using the term growing down. And my initial reaction was, oh shit, that's not the thing we want to talk about. That's the wrong direction. And his point was, you know, you hear about growing up. Growing down, what he means by that is, we are going down, we're aging, but it doesn't mean we can't be growing. And so you now are growing as you're going down in terms of your, you know, physical capabilities perhaps, or something like that, but you need to keep trying to grow. As you point out, Paddy Lord is showing us a lot about that. There's no sign, you're just going to run out of countries, Paddy, that's your problem.
But Barry, you're correct in saying that we need to get less physical and more cerebral as we're moving along, because, you know, you're limited in terms of your physical ability, but that doesn't mean that your brain is limited too. You can be as expansive as your brain allows you to be, and maybe that's the other, you know, frontier that all of us should be trying to expand as much as possible.
Yeah, can I just chip in here? I retired from my day job 3 months ago, as of yesterday. I was very conscious of the fact that I needed to launch myself into this next phase by doing quote unquote interesting things that I normally wouldn't do. So I have signed up for and attended a series of lectures at Rice University. I've attended a series of lectures at the World Affairs Council, the Council of Foreign Relations Division. They had 8 3-hour lectures on essentially China and Russia and the US role in the world. There was reading required on the Council of Foreign Relations lectures, which lasted about 3 hours each. And the last thing I wanted to do was to find myself sitting at home thinking about turning on the television when I got up in the morning. Of course, since the World Cup started, that has destroyed me completely. I'm watching all the games, but I will continue once the World Cup is over to have a reasonably active and disciplined life outside the house, doing things, meeting with other people, attending lectures, going to various groups. And my wife will be retiring in a couple of months, and I'm hoping that she will join me in some of these activities, not all of them by any means. She needs to develop her own stuff as well. And so far, the transition for me has been seamless and very, very easy. And I'm enjoying it immensely. And a lot of the things that we're talking about here, I just don't, maybe I'm ignorant of them or I don't sense them. I'm quite comfortable the way I am. I don't particularly care what most other people might think of me. I don't think, I don't put other people into categories saying, well, you're old and therefore blah, blah, blah. I myself am very, very aware of some physical limitations that I have. Peter Ahern, you talked about balance. I have a very serious balance issue. So I'm very conscious of that. I'm conscious of how I get up from a chair or how I move. I don't move abruptly. And I'm conscious of my age in terms of it's not a good idea for me to fall. So you will never find me on a ladder. I don't play tennis anymore, unfortunately, because of the balance issue and the possibility of falling. And I accept both of those completely. And I do exercises for the balance end of it, and I do what I can. And I'm very comfortable in having what I think is a realistic assessment of the limitations that I have. And I think limitations is even a harsh word, just the evolution of the things I can and cannot do.
I have to
But
say,
I don't have negative connotations about any of it. I tend to be, I look on the bright side of things, and I try to be a positive influence. So
I have to say, I'd be on your side there, Barry. I'd be far less introspective about the situation than some of the group. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm very conscious of the math. We all have some abilities in the mathematical field. Simple arithmetic. Another 10 years, we'll all be 86.
that's right.
As in my case, it's a case of cramming into those remaining years whatever I can, everything I can.
Yeah.
Rather than getting too upset about it. I mean, I spent this afternoon, most of the afternoon, in and out of hospital, having ECGs, pacemaker check, consultation with my cardiologist. Tomorrow I'll be in hospital again, having injections in my wrists because they're not behaving themselves. Monday I'll be in hospital again, having an excision up here, not of my brain, but of some skin damage. And that's just the
That's
way,
life.
the way that's right. So don't get too head up about it. Just be conscious of there's limited time left and make the bloody best of it.
I agree,
Well
Paddy,
said.
completely. Yeah,
Well said.
I agree.
What was the line from the Shawshank Redemption? Get busy living or get busy dying? I'm with you, Paddy.
Clint Eastwood, don't let the old man in.
Yeah,
There you
that's a
go.
good one,
That's a
yeah.
good
And
phrase.
keep making plans. Keep making
Yeah.
plans.
Yeah.
Hey, John Dinan, does you have a good perspective from your classes because you have all ages attending your art classes. Do you encounter any of the dynamic we're talking about?
Well, can I come back to that in a second because I'll forget to refer back to Paddy Lord. Talking about in 10 years' time, we'd be 86. I have an 86-year-old, 85-year-old sister, and she swims every day in the 40-foot, or is that what it's called? The 40-foot out in
Sandy Cove.
out in Sandy Cove. She
Yeah.
goes to mass in the morning. She goes directly down to the 40-foot after that and has about a 5-minute swim every day. She might miss a few over the year, but essentially her schedule is every day. She looks about 65. So
John, she's my sort of lady.
yeah.
What's her phone number?
And I tell you, I mean, I stay with her when I'm teaching in Enniskerry. I was with her a couple of weeks ago when I was teaching just down the road in Enniskerry for a weekend workshop. And she was telling me about being chatted up by some of the fellas because, she's a widow for 10 years, but she gives them short shrift anyway.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't get her phone
It's
number.
too late, Paddy. Yeah.
It's too late, Paddy.
I'd like to give you a different perspective. I'm probably the only one here that lives in an age-restricted community. And I also happen to live in the county in the United States with the most aged population. The average age in this county is 58, and the average age in the age-restricted part of it is 69. I'm above both of those. But there's relentless enthusiasm here for all kinds of sports, golf. There's 3,000 clubs among the 140,000 citizens. It's an amazingly positive attitude towards ageism that you get. And the part of Florida we live in, and some of you know Florida pretty well, you can get very quickly into third world conditions in rural Florida. We're surrounded by it. So the money is all in the age-restricted section, and everything is geared towards us. We run the politics. The stores that sell to older people move in. We provide a lot of employment for younger people. So we have a completely different attitude. I say there's in this community, it has its other problems like too much Trumpism and stuff like that. Too many old baby boomers, white, you know, but in actual fact, it's a tonic to be here, to have, you know, so much activity going on around you and virtually no ageism. In fact, we're kind of looked up to because we have a lot more economic power than the people that live around us.
Interesting.
Yeah.
John Dinan, what about Peter Brady's question on your
Yes.
class?
Thanks, Peter. Sorry, Peter, I didn't get back onto you yet. Yeah, usually about the youngest people who attend my workshops are about in their mid-30s, and they're almost always, in fact, I can't think of a single male who's attended from mid-30s. So most of them are in the older category. I had a 92-year-old woman who got 2 buses from the north side of Dublin out to Enniskerry every day for 5 days.
Great.
One of my workshops, and she rings me then afterwards saying, "How did you mix that color green?" And she had me round her little finger.
Yeah.
She'd say, "John, please help me. You know, I don't know how to do this." And she was a school teacher, but a lot of people who retire take up art, and so I have a lot of, not generally, but I mean, in every class of maybe 12, you'd have 2 or 3 people who are pretty much beginners. And I don't mind that at all because I can remember so well starting off. And I suppose I give them a lot of support. I think if people pay, you should be empathetic to them at least, you know, they deserve that. But there's a big mix, but it's really interesting that there are very few men attend my workshops. And that's been always the case. And yet it's mostly men who teach art. It's extraordinary. If you get 2 men in a workshop of 12, which I actually did in Enniskerry, I couldn't believe it. It's the first time in a long time. So the majority of women, as they get older, seem to be much more open to just enjoying life. Like most of them are not going to be professional artists. Some of them might sell occasionally in a local exhibition. But yeah, it's just interesting. Men seem to be sort of less involved in those group things. So it's great to hear Barry O'Dwyer and others talking about being group things. Incidentally, I went away for a few minutes because I thought just for a bit of light relief, I thought of a poster that I have out in the toilet in my studio. So if students are sitting there for a couple of minutes, they can look at various things like my 12 great wisdoms and things like that. But here's a poster of a senior tournament in Beaulieu, which Black Pat and myself played some years ago. And you can see the vultures sitting on the back. These 2 old people with bandages and knee pads and everything. So I thought it was a good image.
That's great.
Barry Walsh.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, John.
Okay.
Barry Walsh, you referred.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, one final thing. I caught COVID coming back from France. So all through basically October, all through October and even into November, I felt really run down after it and very physically weak. Now I'm fine now. And so, but I found myself getting very aware of my age and thinking, is this going to recover at all, especially at one's age? So it hit me then, really quite a rare thing, that because I'm generally reasonably okay fitness-wise, but it really hit me about my age and that, and it did affect my confidence. And I ran 2 workshops recently at weekends, and the first one I ran, I wasn't sure physically I'd be well enough to be able to deliver it because I was really lacking in energy. But having got through that, it really affected my confidence, but it built it when I saw the course ran fine. And so the second one was no problem at all. So I'm back to my buoyant best now again.
Great. Well done.
Good to hear, John.
So you didn't let it shut you out. I mean, I think that's the danger that now, and what happened to a lot of people in COVID as well, I think, is that people just imprison themselves. They shut themselves out of things that they used to do. My mother-in-law is just such an example. Things that she did that she enjoyed, she said, "Oh, I don't know now, you know, the darkness and, you know, it could be slippy. And I mean, she's got a million and one excuses for not doing things that she would be very healthy for her to do.
Yeah.
So it's easy when one's confidence is lost. I often think of that parable in the scriptures of St. Peter walking on the water until he gets some doubts about himself, you know, and I think we're all a bit like that. Once the confidence erodes, you have to get it back. You have to, as you did, John, jump in again and sink or swim. You have
Yeah,
to
get back up on the horse.
Yeah.
I have a thought, Frank, as the moderator, I'll just say that to you, and that is, I have a couple of tips that help me, and I would really welcome any tips from you guys. The two things, not small or dramatic, are that help me. The first thing is, I realized that as I was getting older, I was talking even louder than I normally do. And in a group, somebody explained to me, hey, Peter, you're doing that because your hearing is diminishing. And the only way you can hear yourself is to talk louder. So that's a message to everybody that age is kicking in on you. And you're also not hearing the people with the softer tones, typically females and younger people. So you're excluding yourself from some communication. So the tip this person gave me, get a hearing test and get hearing aids. And the fact of bringing that to my attention was really, really helpful.
Mm.
The second one is, I get up in the morning, I help Elizabeth do some of her stuff, and that includes taking her weight. And I've about 10 items on my agenda. And after I've done the 10 of them, her weight has gone out of my head. It's something I noticed in the last year or two. It's just gone, as if I never took it. And so when I had that self-awareness that I've lost that little something that happened a minute ago that I wasn't focused on, it's gone. So I have actually developed a tool. I said, hey, this is happening. Use your brain to develop a tool to process it. So now as I take her weight, I say folder Thursday 132.5, and I say it twice. So I'm actually creating a folder in my brain for her weight for today. And so I find that extremely helpful psychologically. Hey, that's something that's happening, but I'm aware of it and I can do something about it.
Very good.
Useful.
So anybody else got any tips for, like, I'd be interested in BOD, your issue with balance. Any tips that you have picked up or anything you do to help with that?
Right. Well, there are exercises that I do to help with the balance issue. But it is a permanent condition that I have. There is no cure for it. It's related to a rare form of neuropathy, but it's strictly a maintenance issue from my standpoint. I go in for treatment every 3 weeks for infusion, 5 hours of infusion at $10,700 per visit. Thank God for insurance. And but it has stabilized it, and it's up to me to do the physical exercises that I can to maintain and possibly marginally improve the stability. But it will never be what it once was. And again, I don't need to fall. I don't want to fall. I haven't fallen. And even when we go away on our trips with the lads, our subcommittee meetings, as we call them, and vast quantities of adult beverages are consumed, I am very, very conscious of how I get out of a chair or how I move. it's just part of how I am, and I've modified my behavior accordingly.
Barry, on that point, there's another group I'm with. Their life transition group, and they're older people here around Los Angeles. And they had a guy, a Dr. Alan Cassell, who is on the faculty at UCLA, and he was giving this presentation about ageism. And he said, what is the most important thing you can do every morning when you get out of bed? And the answer was, check your balance. And he said, a lot of people, as they get older, a big issue becomes they fall and they break a bone.
Bad
So you
things
need
happen.
to do this balance test whenever you can. It's important. I'm taking a certain number of drugs right now, and one of my problems is I get cramps as a result. And I'm getting out of bed like the end of August, beginning of September, and both of my legs cramped at the same time. So I'm trying to stand up and I can't. And I fell about that much on the floor, a carpeted floor. And I hit the frame on my bed going down, kind of like that. And there's two big bursa on the outside of both of your hips. And so I banged that pretty hard. And man, for about 24 hours, it was sore in hell. It was like a hip pointer. And I'm thinking, boys, I should go and get this checked out. Maybe I broke a bone. But that didn't happen. But I still have an issue here I'm working on. But balance is absolutely, you're doing a very wise thing. You got to keep yourself in balance any way you can, because the alternative is you're going to fall. If it's in the wrong place, it could have serious consequences.
Eamon, that's a third thing I do that I've learned, I guess, from working with Elizabeth, and that is before I get up in the morning, I have to get up, go and do 10 things. So before I get up, I actually do exercises lying down, flexing all my leg muscles. And I found that to be extremely helpful. It brings, in doing that, it's making my conscious aware, hey, balance, make sure you're all together, but it's actually exercising the muscles to give me that confidence and that balance. And that really, really helps me.
Yeah, I do about 15 minutes of stretching every day, and that helps also. But
I'm talking about 2 minutes just after I wake up, but when I have to get out of bed, just to get, not to have that fall you're talking about.
Yeah, so I ride my bike on a regular basis, and around here is lots of traffic. So every now and again you stop at a traffic light and you got to stop the bike and put one foot on the ground. And you know, you're on the bike, you're 1 foot on the ground. That's when you really notice this thing about balance. You know, my foot right on the ground. And if I make any mistakes here, I could keel over one side or the other. And who knows, some guy's flying by, he's going to run me over. So I get a constant reminder there about balance.
Funny you mentioned that, Eamon. I have a bike also. I use it mostly when we're in the west of Ireland. And last summer, for the first time, I got really scared on it. Not because of any particular one incident, just the sense, the lack of confidence in it. And it was largely a balance issue.
Oh yeah, and I mean, as your speed slows down, if you're used to biking really quickly, it's not an issue. But if you slow down, you can wobble a little bit. And that can
the consolation is I can still put my socks on in the morning standing up.
That's
I don't have to
good.
sit down and put my socks on. That's progress.
Good for you. I'm
put
just,
them on the
I'm
right
just getting
foot.
after the hip surgeries, I'm just getting back to the point where I can sit on the side of the bed and bend the legs enough to get the socks on.
Hey, Raymond and John Butler, what about tennis? Does that help you guys with things like balance?
It does. It's interesting because one of my daughters said to me now today, she was talking to some guy, he works in an American company, he was over, and he said he plays tennis, he's very proud about it, that he's 68. And she said that her father is older than that, and he was exceptionally impressed, and he gave me a bit of a round of applause, even though I wasn't there. And he said that tennis is very good as an exercise, in addition to the physical aspects of it. It also from a mental point of view, that if you're running, obviously you're just running in a straight line. But this you're back and forth, and it's very good for the brain in that sense. But I do play tennis. I don't have a problem with regard to balance, but a bit like yourself, sometimes I find when I go to stand up after sitting down watching television at night, I'm trying to get a little bit unbalanced. I just have to be a bit careful in that sense. But other than that, my balance is good now. Touch wood.
Yeah.
Can I go back to something you referred to earlier, Peter? The car hire issue. Like yourself, I've been turned down on a number of occasions because of my age. But invariably, I've just gone to the next counter and got a car.
Oh,
So there's no consistency with regard to the practices of the different, and you'll find a different arrangement with the same company in a different part of the world. You know, one office will say, "No, sorry, sir, you're over 70, not a hope." You go to the same office somewhere else, they'll throw in cars. It's so don't let it get you down. There's
yeah.
We,
Well,
There's
Hertz
lots of
in
places here in the
particular-
US where men or women of 90 plus are able to rent cars.
Yeah, we have because we go to Spain regularly. We would always just rent a car. It was very inexpensive, whatever. But we've decided, and we have in fact now bought a car because there's no add-ons to the premium if you're over 70, and there's finding all sorts of ways to back up the price. But then I was over in Scotland last week and rented a car from Hertz, and the range for the driver without any additions was 26 to 99. So if you're 100, you might be in trouble.
That's ages.
We got 24 years.
26 to 99. You're under 26, and there's a certain amount of ageism about young people and driving, but I think that's probably because of the
Risk.
the statistics.
Yeah.
But that was a Hertz car. But as I say, in Spain now, they're charging you in over 2 weeks about an €80 premium if you're over a certain age.
Yeah.
There's only one car hire company that wasn't doing that, but all the rest of them were.
Well, to Paddy's point, your case in point, Hertz in the US don't say anything. If you've got a valid driving license, they'll rent to you. There's no mention of age. Whereas Hertz Ireland have this 75 thing. And I looked at all the Irish rental companies, and they were all the same except one, which is Enterprise. That is 99, and but they're more expensive. But you know, we actually have other options, luckily, in Ireland, because we have Jane's mother's car. And then in Spain, I don't know if you came across the company Centauro. They're not in the States, but I think they're very pan-European. They rented a car from us, again, no question of age, and very, very inexpensive in Greece. So it does vary from country to country and from operator to operator.
In your experience, Peter, is Ireland particularly bad?
Yes. Ireland is notorious. It's notorious in many ways.
Yeah, notorious here, I believe.
Yeah.
For people trying to rent cars.
There was a report, Paddy, I think it was in the Irish Times actually, about a year and a half ago, acknowledging that we're the worst country in the world for renting cars.
Wow.
The rip-offs, especially at the airports, is just appalling.
One interesting thing, Paddy, is that there are a number of credit cards that I have one that provides collision damage waiver insurance if you charge on your card.
Me too.
And up to a couple of years ago, maybe 1 year ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, they had an exclusion, which were 4 countries: Ireland, Northern Ireland, Jamaica, and Lebanon.
Wow. Lebanon.
In my business life, I rented cars all over the world, but Dublin Airport is probably the worst for the last 30 years.
Right.
Mm.
Very, very disorganized, and the car rental is very, very sketchy.
And very dishonest. I mean, you know, if you read the TripAdvisor things about Dublin Airport, the first thing that you'll read about renting cars is take your phone with you, and with the man or the woman at the counter watching you, go around your car with your phone and photograph every freaking square inch of the car and
Mm.
let him see you have recorded the state of the car. Because what will happen if you don't, when you come back, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh, we need to charge you the, you know, $3,000 damage thing because that ding is going to cost a lot of money to repair.
Mm.
Exactly,
You're
and that's
getting ready to
exactly,
get on a plane.
Yeah.
You're not, they're banking that you're not going to argue.
that's
Negotiate-
exactly why, that's exactly why.
Negotiate you down to, okay, well, look, it's going to
Yeah.
cost you $500, 500 euros right now, and we can settle this. What are you going to do? Argue and miss your plane?
Yeah.
It's an
That's
appalling
a
problem. I
very-
don't understand why the government has not fixed this. Frank is right. This is not a new problem at Dublin Airport.
Oh, no, that's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Well,
I
okay.
have a black card with Bank of America, and the way it works is you rent the card on this World Card, as it's called. And that's not the only thing you have to do. You have to call MasterCard and speak to an executive at MasterCard who comes back and sends you a letter guaranteeing you as a good prospect to rent the car. And that's what will get you the reasonable insurance at Dublin Airport. Now, that may have changed in a couple of years, but that's the way it used to be.
Mm.
And you had to go through all of these things just to get an okay insurance coverage on the car. And,
Well,
you know, as somebody said before, all of these all of these rental car companies in Dublin seem to have their own MO. I mean, each one's different than the next one.
Yeah.
And they're all, ridiculously high.
I'm gonna sign out, guys. I think it's been a very interesting discussion.
Absolutely,
And
well
I
done.
think,
Okay.
well
Yes,
done
indeed.
to Peter
For
for
sure.
putting together the presentation. It took a bit of work for sure. I don't
Great
feel
job.
any older than I was an hour ago.
Rest assured, Paddy, you don't look any older.
You're supposed to feel
Right.
younger, Paddy.
Yeah, I actually feel younger. I actually feel younger.
Do we have any
Okay.
thoughts for our next topic? Any volunteers out there?
Yeah, Frank, I had sent you something, if that's still on.
Okay. I'll look it
Okay.
up. again.
Remember,
All the
you
best,
sent
everybody.
me back
Now-
something.
now,
Okay, Paddy.
Yes,
Bye.
Paddy.
One
See you later,
final-
Paddy.
One final question. We're getting close to Christmas. Shall we have a meeting on the 15th and then skip the next one on the 29th?
Sounds like a
I
good
agree
plan.
with that.
Frank.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good plan.
And then
Yeah.
resume again in January. We'll take a 4-week break.
With that.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop recording at this point.